Square Roots by Connie. So, you want to learn how to solve square roots, more specifically on how to simplify them and do all of that stuff. You've come to the right place. Today I'll be teaching you how to solve square roots and simplify them. Hello, my name is Connie Wu, and in this video I'll be teaching you how to solve square roots. To give you a brief introduction to this video, I'll give you a couple pointers that I will mention. Number 1, vocabulary. There will be a lot of words that I will constantly say. Number 2, what are square roots? What is an example of when we will use square roots? Number 3, the 3 types of square root problems I'll be explaining are regular square roots, how to simplify square roots, and lastly, negative square roots. There are many more than just 3, but as an introduction to square roots, I will mention the basic ones. And conclusion, just to sum up everything that I've already said. Vocabulary. Words that I will continuously say. Radicals/radical sign. This basically means the symbol in square roots that you always see. The power of 2 / multiplied by itself. Power of 2 is really just exponents, like 2 to the power of 2 is 4. A perfect square is a result of multiplying a rational number by itself. And lastly, simplifying to make things simpler, easier to understand, and to perform. And lastly, I forgot to put on the slides, but something that I will mention a lot is prime factorization. Now, if you don't know what prime factorization is, the process of writing all numbers as a product of primes. So, for example, let's say we have the number 20. We can break that down into 2 factors. What is a square root and when will we use square roots? A square root is a component of a number that yields the original number when multiplied by itself. An example of how and when we are using square roots is at one point in your life, you're going to have to find an apartment or a place to live for yourself. This is where square roots are helpful. See, not everything you learn in school is actually useless, except for learning the 25 digits of pi. I don't even know what the point of that is. When you're finding an apartment or when you're finding a place to live for yourself, square roots are especially helpful because many people will find that it is a quicker and easier way to measure out how big your house is or your place is, so when you buy furniture, it fits in your house. Let's start explaining regular square roots first. Before we begin, let's take a brief moment to look over the questions that we will be mentioning today. Our first question is, what is the square root of 16? Now, if we go back to my vocabulary, I stated that a perfect square is the result of multiplying a rational number by itself. What this basically means is that in order to solve a perfect square root, we need to find a number that multiplied by that same number equals to 16. So in this case, it would be the number 4. As I've already shown, the perfect square chart, 4th row in the 4th column. This means 4 times 4 equals 16. And to double check, you can do 16 divided by 4, which equals 4, obviously. And that's how you solve regular square roots. Let's look at another example. Our second problem is, what is the square root of 100? Now, again, we know that 10 times 10 equals 100 because we know our times tables. This answer would be 10 because if we divided 100 divided by 10 equals 10. It's not that hard. Now, let's move on to simplified square roots. Moving on to simplifying square roots. Now, simplifying square roots is completely different from regular square roots because simplifying square roots don't include perfect squares. Our first question is, what is the square root of 28? In order to simplify 28, we need to find factors that have a perfect square in them. So going back to our perfect square chart, we need to find a number that is a perfect square and is also a factor of 28. Now you can see that 4 is a factor of 28 and it is also a perfect square because 2 times 2 is 4. So we can draw out the lines of 4 and 4 times what equals 28? That is 7. Remember when I said 2 times 2 equals 4? We will just break the number 4 down and you can circle 2 and 7 and your answer would be 2 to the power of 7. And that is how you simplify square roots. Now let's move on to our second question, which is, what is the square root of 72? Let's write that out. In order to simplify a non-perfect square, we need to find 2 factors that equal to 72 in which one of those factors is a perfect square. And the key to find the most simplified version is that we need to find the largest perfect square that fits perfectly into 72, and in that case it would be 36. If you know your times tables, you can easily cancel out that it is 36 because 36 is a perfect square, considering 6 times 6 is 36. So you would put 36 and 2. Now, because 2 can no longer be simplified to the fullest extent, we can circle it and forget about it. So now, as I mentioned before, 36 is a perfect square, so we can break down 36 into 6 and 6, and our answer would be 6 and 2. Our last problem is, what is the square root of 98? So again, let's write this out. Square root of 98, question mark. Now, what is the square root of 98? As we've done to the last two problems, we need to find two factors in which one of those factors is again a perfect square. This case would be 49 and 2. The key to finding the perfect square is to find the biggest number that can fit into your square root. And 7 times 7 equals 49. So just circle this. And your answer should be 7 to the power of 2. So our last category for this video is how to solve negative square roots. Now, negative square roots are kind of impossible, and I'll show you why. So our first question is square root of -4. And we can't physically solve this because 2 times 2 equals 4. And -2 times -2 equals 4 again. So this wouldn't make sense because neither of them can be multiplied by itself to get square root of -4. Is that we create an imaginary number. Now the imaginary number would be square root of -1, which equals I, and the I stands for imaginary number, obviously. And now we will rewrite it. Square root of -4 times square root of -1, and we can break down the -4 into, and then we just bring down this, and it would be I, because again we go back to the key. Square root of -4 would be 2I. Now for our second question of this category would be our last question, because I believe that the last question you guys can do it on your own. So our second question is square root of -16. Now again, we can't properly simplify this question because there are no properties that make up 16 that is multiplied by itself, so we will use what we did on the first question. We will turn the -16 into a +16 and just multiply that by -1, which is again an imaginary number, so I. And then for 16 we can use prime factorization, and we can break these down. So 2 and 8, 2 and 4, and 2 and 2. And then we circle all the 2's, and it would be under this 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. We combine those two together and it would be 4. Our answer is 4I. And there you have it. This is how you solve square roots. After learning how to solve square roots and simplifying square roots, don't you feel empowered? Don't you feel proud of yourself? You can now do anything now. Everything that was once holding you back is no more. Have fun apartment hunting, and thank you for taking your time to watch this video. I would appreciate feedback.